New rules, investigations, and a shock departure. This week we're chatting all about the news that's gone on over this F1 break, so get ready, because you've been summoned to the steward's office. Hello everyone and welcome back to the steward's office. I'm Sarah and we've had a month-long break from Formula One. There has been absolutely no racing over the month of April after they had to cancel 2 of the Middle Eastern races because of everything going on in the world right now. And it's given us all a nice break towards the start of the season to gather ourselves and of course for F1 news to go a little bit crazy. We're coming up to the Miami Grand Prix though, so we are going to get cars back on track pretty soon, but before that happens I thought I'd catch you guys up on all of the news that's gone on this break. I keep going to say winter break and it's not, it's just this random break in April, because even though we have no cars on track, F1 always finds a way to stay in the headlines, and that happens without a doubt every break that we have. So if you don't know everything that's gone on, or you've completely unplugged from Formula One, which is completely understandable, and would like to know what has been going on since you've also taken a break, you are in the right place, because I've got some of the biggest headlines that we've had over April. Before we get into everything though, please make sure you're following this podcast wherever you're listening to it, or you're subscribed on YouTube so you don't miss an episode throughout this season. But let's dive into all of that news, and I had to start off with what was the most shocking news of this break, and to be fair, probably the most shocking news in Formula One. I am gonna say, since it was announced that Lewis Hamilton was leaving Mercedes and joining Ferrari, I don't think I've been as shocked at news since that point, but it is the news that Gianpiero Lambiase is moving to McLaren in 2028. Now, GP is Max Verstappen's long-term race engineer. He has been partnering with Max for years. They've gone through highs and lows together, and of course he has been on the radio helping guide Max to those 4 world championships. And look, they are just a pair that everyone knows. A lot like Lewis Hamilton and Bono. It was always GP and Max. You know, they have this relationship on the radio and everyone says they kind of pick like an old married couple at times, or like 2 brothers arguing, because it can get a little bit tense on the radio. But GP knows what Max is like. Max knows what GP's like, and none of it's ever taken to heart. It's just the way their working relationship is, and it works for them. I think for Max Verstappen, GP is an engineer that just understood what Max needs from him, when Max is frustrated on the radio, what he needs, how to help him, how to get the most out of the car and everything as well. And yeah, it was super shocking to hear the news that GP wasn't going to be staying at Red Bull. Even without Max there, I just thought GP would be staying with the team and potentially just move up in terms of his roles there. But he has opted to leave, and not immediately. Like I said, he is going to McLaren in 2028. That's when his Red Bull contract also expires. And he's going into a role that's basically a promotion in McLaren. He's becoming their chief racing officer, so taking some of the responsibility away from Andrea Stella, who is still going to be team principal, even though there were rumours that he was going to move. He's just going to take some of the responsibilities off of Andrea Stella's shoulders, so Andrea can focus on some other things within the team. But it is a really big promotion for GP, and yeah, understandably not one that he'd want to turn down. McLaren are expecting to welcome him no later than 2028, and that makes me think he's going to have to leave Red Bull a little bit earlier than that to complete his gardening leave before he can officially be in that capacity with McLaren. I don't know whether when they say no later than 2028, it's because they're still kind of working out when they could get GP out of that contract, because I feel like they're probably going to want him in that role sooner rather than later, because Andrea Stella is currently covering a lot of bases in McLaren. But, you know, GP has been such an integral part of Red Bull, obviously on Max Verstappen's side of the garage, but he is just someone that you know is associated with Red Bull. To be fair, Max Verstappen had come out and said not long after news about GP moving that GP had come to him and said, look, this is the offer McLaren has given me. What do you think? You know, there is that friendship there where they go for advice to each other. And Max is just like, yeah, you'd be stupid not to take the offer. It's such a good job. It's great for you and your family. Why wouldn't you take it? So there's no sort of ill will there. There's nothing there that would make you think, oh, something's happened between him and Max and that's why he wants to leave. It's just a really, really great opportunity. But I think what has made everyone look at this with a little bit more interest, though, is the fact that Max Verstappen has previously said, look, when GP leaves the team or stops being a race engineer, I'll leave. I don't necessarily want to work with a race engineer that's not GP, which is understandable. The question is, does that still hold? Would he still leave? I mean, Max's contract, I want to say, is 2028 as well, that he finishes, maybe a little bit longer. And he's been super vocal about not wanting to race into his 40s. He's got quite a young family himself, between his stepdaughter and his daughter who's only just turning 1, and he really values spending that time with his family and with his friends, and especially because he's not enjoying this set of regulations, right? And there have been so many rumors this season that he's gonna retire, he's gonna leave at the end of the season, and they are just rumors, we don't know. But it makes you wonder whether, once the contract Max currently is on with the Red Bull, once that is done, will he opt to leave the sport? He's been doing a lot of endurance racing, especially over this April break, and he seems to be really enjoying that. He's finding a lot of joy in it, and it's been great to see him find other areas of motorsports that he's interested in, and maybe he'll want to leave F1 and pursue those, because the schedule is not as heavy. It's still intense, but it's not as heavy as 24 races on the calendar, which gives him more time with friends and family. And if he just enjoys driving those cars more than a Formula 1 car, that's fair. So I think, yeah, GP leaving was a huge, huge news, on top of the fact it did raise a lot of questions about Max Verstappen's future, not just with Red Bull, but in Formula 1. And aside from Max, it also brought up the question of what really is going on at Red Bull at the moment, because they have had severe brain drain. And if you don't know what brain drain means in Formula 1, it's basically when you have a lot of members of your team, a lot of them that might be higher up, so your race engineers, your strategists, your head of racing operations and things like that. A lot of them are leaving in one go. There's brain drain there. People are leaving the team. We've had Jonathan Wheatley leave. We've had Rob Marshall leave. Obviously, Jean-Pierre Lambiassi's gone. A lot of their sort of top members of staff have left the team, and you wouldn't necessarily worry about that. But Red Bull haven't seemingly made any huge signings of their own to fill in those spaces that these people with years and years of experience, and especially of know-how within that team, have. Like, they haven't tried to fill those roles in with any other big names. And I think a lot of people are sort of looking at Red Bull like, what is going on there, and what are you doing to fix this issue? This is a great signing for McLaren, though. GP comes with a wealth of experience and of knowledge. I think he's going to do terrific in that new role with McLaren as well. And yeah, look, he's been a race engineer for years. He obviously wants to move up in the world of Formula 1. He wants a little bit more responsibility, where he's not just on one side of the garage, he's helping with the whole team. And yeah, I think McLaren have got a great sign in there. We've also had some pretty big news come from the FIA in terms of some F1 rules that will be in place from Miami onwards. Now, the FIA have said they'll continuously review this set of regulations to make sure that people are happy, the drivers, the teams, and that they're working the way they're meant to. So the FIA have obviously taken this April break to review the first 3 races, the feedback they've had, the data that they've had, and figure out what's working and what isn't. And they have come in with quite a few rule changes, to be fair. And they've kind of touched a couple of different points with these new rules. So there are changes to help qualifying, to reduce the closing speeds between competitors so we don't get another incident like we had with Ollie Behrman. Changes that are going to reduce the chance of incidents at the start line, and they've preemptively put some rules in to make sure that we don't get any issues in wet weather running. And the biggest changes, I thought, when I was looking through it personally, came in for qualifying. And look, qualifying is something that all the drivers have been complaining about, because it's not been like qualifying that we've had before. The problem now is that the drivers can't really go flat out when they're doing a fast lap in quali, and that should be when we see the cars and the drivers on an absolute racer's edge, right? But because of the way that these new cars are and the engines and harvesting energy, it means that the drivers aren't able to go flat out and are having to be a little bit more careful about when they use their speed and when they don't. So they've changed a couple of things to do with qualifying. There will, or should be at least, less of a need to lift and coast and less of a need to recharge during the lap in high-speed corners and on long straights. The FIA also have the power to change the recharge limits on these batteries in the event that they think super clip-in is going to be an issue. So they can change that race to race. They're changing how quickly the battery can recharge and how long it can recharge for, which in theory should help the drivers. But that's in qualifying. There's a lot of overhaul there. They have reduced the electrical energy deployment in any flat out corners where overtaking is less likely, and what that should do is limit this massive speed differential between drivers where one might be going quite slowly and one is going super quick and causing a crash. So it should make it more safe for the drivers. That crash between Franco Colapinto and Ollie Behrman, because of that speed differential, Franco was fine and was able to carry on going, didn't crash into anything. Ollie Behrman, on the other hand, had quite a heavy hit, and so they're hoping that this new rule will stop those speed differentials from happening and be safer for the drivers. And if it works, I'll be super glad, because that crash from Ollie was awful to watch, and I'm so glad he's okay. The FIA have also changed triggers for race starts. So basically before, drivers weren't really allowed to use the electrical energy at a race start. They had to completely rely on the petrol powered part of their car, which is fine, only sometimes the petrol powered start doesn't always work. There are issues, and what you have are drivers that don't get off the line with everyone else. They're stuck stationary in their grid box for a little bit longer, and it causes incidents and crashes, and it's not great, right? Because you have this stationary object in the middle of the track when other cars are thinking it's going to move the same as me, so I can still go into that space. What the FIA have opted to do is change it so that at lights out, if that petrol powered start is bad, the car is stalled, it's not moved, the electrical energy should be triggered and allow the car to move off the line, reducing the risk of crashes. And anything that reduces the number of crashes or incidents we could potentially have is always good in my book. They have also, for wet weather, and now bear in mind we haven't had any wet weather races yet, I'm sure we'll get at least one this season, but they have changed the tyre blanket temperature for the intermediate tyres, and they've also changed things to help with grip on the wet tracks and simplified the rear light system so there are easier cues for the drivers to understand. They're not all of the changes. There's a couple of them, a couple of the main points, very simplified, but those are some of the changes the FIA has made. Like I said, that's going to happen from Miami onwards for the rest of the season, unless the FIA have re-reviewed the rules and decided we need to make some more changes. So as of right now, those are the black and white rules. Do I think these are going to make a huge difference to the racing? No. I will be completely honest with you. I don't think these are going to make a massive amount of difference. I think it's a really good starting point, though. I'm glad that the FIA have been listening specifically to the drivers when it comes to their safety concerns about the high-speed differentials, as well as their unhappiness and discontent with qualifying. So I think we're going in the right direction. I don't think it's to the extent that the drivers are necessarily going to want, and for that matter, for some of the fans. Realistically though, right, look, these set of regulations have been an absolute pain for pretty much everyone involved. The drivers just aren't happy, and it's not to do with the aero, it's mainly down to the engine, to battery management and deployment and harvesting, and them not being able to drive as naturally as what they have done in previous seasons. And I don't think there's a quick fix to that, because the FIA wanted it to become more sustainable, which is fine. These engine regulations are a really big part of the reason why we have a team like Audi on the grid, because they didn't want to be part of a motorsport series where sustainability and the sort of environmental concerns went to the forefront, and having that reliance on electrical energy in the battery was a huge drawing point. You know, it was a huge driving force as to why Audi joined. So I think it's going to take a lot for the FIA to fix all the issues and complaints, and they're never going to make everyone happy. Like I said, I think it's a good step forward. I really do hope qualifying wise, it does make a difference, and we get to see the drivers being able to push a bit more and drive more naturally on those laps. But we are just going to have to wait and see. But because we've had this big rule change and we've had a month without any racing, the FIA have decided to change free practice in Miami from 60 minutes to 90 minutes. They've added on an extra half an hour. And the main reason for this is because Miami is a sprint weekend. Yeah, we're coming back to F1 with a sprint. I don't know how I feel about that. But it obviously means that the drivers are only getting that one practice session, the teams are only getting that one practice session. So the FIA have added that 30 minutes on to the only practice session that we have to help the drivers and the teams get to grips again and sort of make up for that month break that they've had that wasn't meant to be there in the first place. I do think it's going to be super useful for the drivers between having the break, and also because a lot of the teams seem to want to bring upgrades to Miami. They've pretty much all worked on the cars over this month break because there's been no issue with that. It's not like summer and winter break where they have to go into shutdown. So a lot of them have been trialing and testing different aero parts and all the rest of it. So yeah, I think having that 90 minutes gives all the teams and drivers a little bit more of a chance to test out parts, but in general we're going to see how this goes. I don't necessarily think an extra 30 minutes going into sprint qualifying is going to make a huge amount of difference, but I still think it's a bit more useful than just leaving it at 60 minutes. And there was a piece of news though that I definitely had not been expecting this break, right? And I got this piece of news not long after I woke up when I looked at my phone, and it was the fact that Italy are currently investigating F1 drivers and teams to do with their tax obligations. Out of everything I was expecting this break, wasn't expecting that. It was reported in Italian newspapers. Apparently, Italy are doing administrative checks into whether foreign teams have fulfilled their tax obligations. Basically, any money that the drivers or teams made while on Italian soil during the Italian GPs and everything, they have to declare that in Italy. It has to be declared in the country. And I think essentially what they're investigating is whether that happened or didn't. Now, the checks are in the early stages. They've not mentioned any names. One of the Italian papers just caught wind of it and has reported on it, but we'll see if we get any more news on that. But yeah, slightly odd bit of F1 news. Going into better news though, and stuff that I'm super excited for here, is the fact that Turkey is coming back to the F1 calendar in 2027 on a multi-year contract, and I am chuffed with this, guys. You have no idea. I think Turkey is a really lovely track for F1 cars. I'm so glad they're bringing this back instead of trying to build a new circuit or get another street circuit on the calendar. Their contract runs until 2031, so it's quite a substantial amount of time for the track. I do wonder what is going to be swapped out. We already know Barcelona, I think, is rotating on the calendar. Zandvoort, Spa are rotating on the calendar. But we also have the addition of Portimao in 2027, which I'm also super excited about. These are tracks I really do love. So it's going to just be interesting to see what next year's calendar fully looks like, but I am definitely excited about Turkey being back on the calendar. We do have some other team news other than what's gone on with GP. This time looking at Audi, and they finally have announced a new racing director. And their new racing director is Alan McNish. Now, this comes off the back of Jonathan Wheatley having left the team as their team principal, apparently because of arguments and disagreements with Mattia Binotto. That's what the rumour was, that he really wasn't happy and the two of them weren't getting along. Bear in mind that Jonathan Wheatley has not been in that role very long, and he was one of the guys poached from Red Bull. But yeah, they finally have a racing director in place from Miami onwards, who's starting really quickly. Mattia has been acting team principal for a little while now, but Alan McNish is used to Audi. He's been working with them for a while now. More recently, he's been the head of their development team, so all their junior drivers, that junior academy he's been in charge of. So he knows the team and the structure, and hopefully there'll be a little bit more stability for this team from Miami onwards now. And I'm gonna end now on some super positive and exciting news that makes me smile, and that is the fact that Doriane Pins has had a private test with an old F1 car with Mercedes. Now, she is the 2025 F1 Academy winner, and she's part of the Mercedes Development Academy, their development development drivers, and she got given the opportunity after some amazing runs on the simulator. They'd looked at her data, she was doing really well, and they gave her the opportunity to test one of their old F1 cars. She is the first F1 Academy champion to take part in an F1 test, which is great, and hopefully we get to see more of it. But she said it was one of the best days of her life, and I can only imagine what that must have felt like for her and for anyone that's doing an F1 test for the first time. But it does make her the first French woman to drive a modern F1 car, but also the first woman ever to drive a Mercedes F1 car, which is crazy. And look, hopefully this is a really good sign going forwards, that we are seeing female drivers taking part in these F1 tests, and hopefully it's going to bring people like Doriane Pins that one step closer to an F3 seat, an F2 seat, and eventually make that jump into Formula 1. So it was really, really great to see and hear about, and yeah, fingers crossed we get to see more F1 Academy drivers and winners be able to have these sort of opportunities. It's amazing, and I'm so excited for her. But that covers pretty much all of the news that I have been able to gather over this April break. It's been a hectic one. It has been pretty busy considering there have been no races. Miami is the next race, a sprint weekend. It makes me feel slightly nervous considering we've had no racing in April, so who knows what's going to happen. I'm excited though. I am excited to see F1 cars back on track. It's been a really nice break, and it's been nice to have my weekends completely free, but I am excited to see cars back on track. Hopefully some exciting upgrades though. That's what I've got my fingers crossed for, that we get some really good exciting upgrades brought in. A lot of the teams have been testing out different things. Apparently Red Bull have created or recreated the Macarena wing for their own car. Ferrari have got another version of the Macarena wing, but also apparently have basically redesigned half their car and tested that out in a filming day in Monza. And a lot of the other teams have been working on things. I'm sure Honda and Aston Martin are trying to figure out if they can fix that engine. Williams are going to be actively trying to cut down weight in that car. So yeah, I think there's going to be a heck of a lot for us to keep an eye out on in Miami, but I can't wait. And of course I will be back with a Miami review once the race is done. Thank you guys so much for listening though. Make sure you follow me either on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast so you don't miss a single episode, and I will see you guys the next time you're summoned to the steward's office.